Just confirming to see if we are live. We'll get the hang of this at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of buttons to push. Okay, we're good now. So I'll go ahead and proceed with the roll call vote of the adoption of the agenda.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. So as a reminder, every item will have to do a roll call vote just because of the virtual meeting. So we have a motion by Commissioner Shermang, and can you remind me who seconded that?
Dave Means.
Commissioner Means. So we'll take the vote. Commissioner Riker.
I'm sorry?
We're doing a roll call vote for approval of the agenda.
Yes and yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Tenscher?
Yes.
And Chair Marciniak?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. So then
Okay, now we
there you go.
move to the approval of last meeting's minutes of September. Are there any additions, corrections, or other comments for the meeting's minutes?
I had a question about item 9 on the commissioner's comments and reports. Let's just see here. I thought that there were some comments or answers by staff to item 9 with respect to a couple of different things. Samantha, do those normally not enter into the minutes that one of the directors gave answers to those comments by commissioners?
I definitely can. I can go back through the video and update that if you'd like. If you want that detail.
I don't mean to make work, but I thought there were some important comments made in terms of how busy certain staff members were, and I think it's important to put that in the record.
Okay, I can definitely go back and record that. That being said, I would then have to, if I can bring the minutes back to you at the January meeting with that addition, and you can approve them at that point if you'd like.
Thank you.
Sound good? If everyone's in agreement on that.
Yeah, is everybody in agreement that we postpone the approval of the September minutes until January? So
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
So we'll go ahead and do that with the correction that Alan has put in for item 9 on the commissioner's report. The next item on there is public comment. Now, do we have, I know we have some letters to present.
Yes.
And other moments, other public comments that may be happening. So with that, could you read the public comment?
Yeah, so at this point, I've received one general public comment email, which I'll read, and then I'll double check if anything else has come in the meantime. So the letter, Dear PRAC Commissioners, I would like you to consider putting a discussion about lighting in the community park on your next agenda. It would be nice to see the lights in the park dimmed after hours. Since your commission proposed and the council voted to close the restrooms after sunset, it makes sense to reconsider the need for bright lighting that exists all night long in that park. If we are to protect residents' quality of life, reconsidering the lighting plan at the community park should be part of that discussion. We appreciate the town has been working on the lighting. It would be nice to know what has been done with the lights on Lincoln Avenue and if the dimmer timer is possible. Thank you, Debbie Wellborn and Lloyd Penrod of Lincoln Avenue. And then I'll double check to see if there's been any other public comment received.
If I will, Sam, I'll just interject on parts of the question and parts of the query. First, at the purview, the manager's purview, staff has replaced at the expense of about $9,000 a street light that Ms. Wellborn and Mr. Penrod were expressing concern about. It has been replaced with a 3-foot-ish approximately bollard light. So I just want to let you know, you've asked what we have been doing. And as you also know, from an ecological standpoint, the town has replaced all of its streetlights throughout town that are town-owned by LED. And some of those have what would be considered a whiter light just by visual, and some are still a bit yellow. So with that, those actions have been taken, and I think that is a real positive towards the concern that the folks were looking at. I would be concerned because if you're talking about a whole complete lighting study of the park, that is something, we have streetlights on Lincoln that are adjacent, and lighting way on the other adjacent path parallel to Washington. So I'm probably thinking that may be more of a council purview if that's something, but I wanted to share with you what has been done as a result of the dialogue and the actions taken to try to improve. Lighting also has a public safety impact from a law enforcement, security, and also a liability standpoint. So there's a lot of moving pieces to a discussion as opposed to just, quote, dimming and or the expense and technical capacity of whether dimmers can particularly work. So I just share that with you, but I do think that probably that's a council action item.
Thank you, Steve. I'm just curious about our current lighting system. What is the feasibility of dimming individual lights at one point? And that I know with the technology, with the LEDs, we have a lot of programmability in all these lights. So certain times they can be dimmed to 70%, 50%, or whatever it is. Not to go into all the safety things, but what is the feasibility of this?
Well, I think Chair Marciniak, one, you're looking at a complete retrofit of all of the ballasts and mechanisms and dimmer structures because those aren't put in. So, and then you'd have to put sensors in and programmers. The lights that were put in do not have that capacity. So all of that would have to be retrofitted. And I don't want to give any of you a bad number in terms of that. And that's why we focused on trying to replace the light that was driving the most concern. And, we also need to look at, compatibility townwide, like I say, public safety. But right now, the lights do not have the ability for us to individually go put them all on a dimmer. I'm going to say it's a lot like the house. Smart technology exists right now, but most people would need to go out and spend quite a bit of money to invest in the smart dimmers and various things that would allow their existing lights to dim and then program them and put them on a schedule. So I'm just saying we have, LED lights, and they are certainly, but that part, they weren't bought with dimmers and programmable capacities when they were put in place 8 or 10 years ago. So that would be again, I'm just going to say, if that's something the council is interested in, I certainly can evaluate what the cost for the retrofit parts, labor, and installation. But we're not talking about something where I can go right now and go with a smartphone and they dim, and then what is the appropriate dimming component. And again, I'm just going to say, I would also want to hear really strongly from law enforcement, because streetlights, lighting in those areas, there is a significant public safety component as well as a legal liability component that I have to factor in from a risk management perspective.
Okay, so
I just wanted to add in, I think it's important for the commission to know that this particular resident has been in discussion with the town for quite some time about how the lighting, when the park renovation happened, affects them. They live directly across the street. And so the town has made considerable changes to the lighting in that area. The letter submitted is rather open-ended, but I think it's important for you to understand, you know, where that's being, where it's being received from. And Steve talked about some of the things that have already been done to try to mitigate that issue. So I just wanted to kind of fill that in, as that this has not come before the commission before as an issue. So you may or may not know that that has been going on. So.
Can I ask you a question, Samantha?
Sure.
How many times has this resident written to the commission? Do you have like record of that? Because
to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission on this specific issue?
Just on lighting, like it sounded like you said it was like a repetitive complaint from this resident?
Is the first, I believe this is the first time this specific issue has been written to the commission itself.
Okay, but they've had other lighting issues. Is that what you're saying?
There's been kind of an ongoing discussion with town staff for some time since the park was renovated, and that certain
with this particular resident.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, good to know.
And if I will, I'll add one piece of information. I think, Chair Marciniak, to your point, we did go out on a demonstration basis and buy a one-off dimmer to put in the street light that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And we installed that. They were not happy with the reduced dimming that we put in place. And then we further have replaced it with a bollard so that it removes it from the, you know, a street height, you know, 14-foot type of to the 3-foot. So I'm just, for background, but that would be a very expensive proposition to do on, you know, without a system-wide. But I do want to know that we have tried that. That was not received well or as an acceptable outcome. My last communications from both of them were that they were they were appreciative of the bollard light and preferred the bollard over the street light.
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with that. I have seen the bollard light. It is an improvement. It is noticeably different from the other lights. But the park is well lit all through the night, and we'll leave it at that at this point. I think we got that. Oh, I have one more public comment from my wife, who is unable to get onto the system, and she would like to make a comment with the public thing. So I will turn over my spot to her, if that's okay with everybody.
I'm sorry, Paul, it's actually not. We have a process for public comment, and it has to be submitted before the meeting or even during the meeting, but it has to come to me. So the public, the public isn't able to get on to the live meetings anymore. In Zoom, they are able to watch from YouTube or Channel 28 and submit prior to the meeting their public comment. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
If she'd like to send me an email with it, if it's a general public comment or if it's something that's specific to an agenda item, then I can pull that in as the meeting's going on. So that's another option.
Okay, thank you.
Sam, can you give her the email address so everybody's aware of what it is?
Public comment at yville.com.
Thank you, Sam.
And I monitor that throughout the meeting.
Very good. Unaware of this, especially in a Zoom meeting, there's a lot of new procedures here that are not just. With that, with no other public comment, we'll close the public comment section and move on to the administration items. First on that item is discussion and possible action to limit special events in park. Samantha, you gave a very good report on that.
Yeah, so I did attach the staff report to the obviously to the agenda. Sorry, I'm trying to pull that up. I'm doing multiple like techie things all at the same time. Woo! Okay, so just to go over that quickly, this is coming back to you from our September 2020 meeting where we spoke about several things that we wanted to kind of vet further. So we received, at that meeting, you received those data reports and patterns of the use of the two main parks, Yountville Community Park and Veterans Memorial Park. We spoke at length about that. We spoke about bringing back specifically the issues around special events, which is, larger events, generally drawing more than 200 people to a park. And so in the staff report, I did kind of break it down again for you in 2019, because that's kind of the last normal typical year we had, where there were 6 non-town sponsored events. 5 of those were in Yountville Community Park and 1 was in Veterans Memorial Park. And then the 14 town sponsored events. And then I blended them together just to kind of see, on the calendar where things fell and where potentially there were some issues that we ran into as far as, back-to-back weekends or things like that. And so really analyzing that information, most of our events occur in June through October, which makes sense. We can also see that there were several occurrences in 2019 of events happening on back-to-back weekends. Focusing on Yountville Community Park, an example of that is we had a movie in the park on a Friday night and the next day was Rock the Ride. That would be considered a very busy weekend in a park, especially one within a neighborhood. And then July was a very busy month with events taking place in September. We had 2 weekend events that were 2 weeks apart. And then in October, again, we had back-to-back events. So those aren't all just special events. They are non-town sponsored and they are sponsored by the town. So kind of taking that into consideration, I posed a couple questions for the commission to work through tonight. This is based on that information and also your discussion at the last meeting. So things we can discuss, would we require the non-town sponsored events to move to Veterans Memorial Park or potentially out of Yountville if we are not able to hold them, if there's growth or other things that we're not able to provide at that park that they appreciate. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's my dog's squeaky toy. The beauty of working at home. So staff does believe that all events would be able to move to Veterans Memorial Park without significant impacts. They are not specifically, youth-centered events. A couple of them are not. They're really focused towards adults. So having the playground, I don't think is detrimental to their event. And we also have adequate time to begin working with event holders for alternate plans for 2021. This would limit the impacts to neighbors to only town-sponsored events, which at Yountville Community Park, which I think is the main park that we're focused on because of it being around homes, would be 6 times per year. And that would be no more than once per month for potential for at least 30 days between events, with the exception of when we do a movie night on Friday night and then Yountville Days on Sunday. So that would be the only weekend where there would be 2 large drawing events within the same month. The other thing PRAC could recommend is a policy that non-town sponsored events wishing to take place in Yountville Community Park would have to meet certain criteria to move forward with a permitting process. And that permitting process could include coming before this commission for review of that. Hold on just a second, I'm really sorry. Ow, ominous. Oh, Lord, dogs. So that would be something that we could discuss as well. I don't believe the current events that take place in Yountville Community Park would have an issue moving. This would really be when a new event comes forward saying, no, we really want to use that specific facility. And then another option that you could talk about is to recommend a policy to council that non-town sponsored events would not be held in Yountville Community Park moving forward at all. So those are kind of the options that I see. So I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we came out of the last meeting in September, we were really focused on non-town sponsored events and focused on Yountville Community Park. So I was really kind of brought those options back as things that I thought were feasible. But obviously open to all of your feedback and any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Samantha. I do appreciate the report you did. It was very thorough. Does any of the commissioners have any questions or comments to make on this at this time?
Yes, I do. First of all, Samantha, you do have a comment regarding number 7A from Pam Reeves. Do you want to talk about that now, or you read that in later?
Yeah, so if you have questions that I can answer, that I can go ahead and do that, and then I'll read the public comment in before you have your final discussion. If that's okay.
Sure.
Maybe we should read the public comment and then have the discussion, so we have
Okay.
that.
Alrighty. So regarding item 7A, dear commissioners, after reading the staff report on event locating in town parks, I would encourage you to recommend a change in the special event policy to exclude non-town sponsored events from community park. Along with that recommendation, I would encourage you to make sure that there are no exceptions to that policy. All non-town sponsored events should be held at Veterans Park where there is less impact on the surrounding residents. To protect Veterans Park from overuse, perhaps the PRAC should suggest that all new applications for non-town sponsored events should come before the commission in order to vet and control the types of events using our public facilities. Thanks for considering my comment. Pam Reeves, Jefferson Street, Yountville. And then I'll just double check if I've received anything else. I have not received any other public comments at this time.
All right, so my comments as a follow-up to that, there's a couple items. One is not specifically back to Pam Reeves' comments, but by moving it down to Veterans Park, it will definitely affect residents down there, both the residents who live both in the Bella Vista mobile home park. I'm not sure how many are there, but 50 or 60 homes, I believe, as well as the apartments that are out in front. So whether it's at the Yountville Community Center or it's down at Bella Vista at the Veterans Park, it will still affect residents from one end to the other. In addition, I think there's more parking available in the north end of town than there is down at the Veterans Park area, because you only have the street right there and maybe 6 to 8 parking spaces beyond that, which we've already been talking about as changing for parking. We discussed this in some meetings last year or earlier this year. So I don't see the big advantage of moving the various events from Yountville Park down to Veterans Park. And I have nothing one way or the other as far as I'm personally concerned, but I don't think in general there's a real need from one versus the other. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Dave. Any other comments or Carol?
I've got one. Yeah, looking at this, the only event that looks, and I don't know their timing, that Keller does his staff party there, the picnic, that was July 30th on Sam's report. But the other ones, as far as I know, they're all during the daytime. So the whole issue of lighting, and I know the parking is going to happen there and the people, but the whole lighting issue, which has come up many times with the residents there, that wouldn't be a problem going on because these are all daytime events there. The movies in the park, of course, are at night. The town one things there, but I guess I just still feel that, if I don't have a problem with them, for us to be able to use both parks and have that as an option, and to exclusively say if it's a non-town that we absolutely, would just say we can't allow them up there, personally.
I think in some senses what the residents around the community park are driving at is that I think they'd like to see it as a more casual, less heavily used venue where people could informally meet and gather. In terms of the north versus the south, Dave, I appreciate you calling out that there are residences at the south end there. For some reason, it doesn't feel quite so impactful there. But your comments about parking are very good. That, definitely could be a problem because some of these events with hundreds of attendees, I think parking would be a real issue at the south end.
Thank you, Alan. I do have a comment. Living close to the community park, I do not object to having large events there, especially the movies in the park and the town sponsored stuff. Having special events, most of them, except for the Alzheimer's one, which is a very large one, and parking is all over the place, just because of the size of the crowd. We need to probably concentrate on the size of the group that's going to be anticipated here, whether it outgrows our ability to safely handle it, and also the frequency. Having a movie at the park one night and an event the next day is, both days, parking is totally filled around everywhere. So it is issues on that, and it isn't going to help if you move it down to the south end of town or have it at the north end of town. I think we need to kind of look at spacing out the events, and also maybe having the commission look at these unscheduled events so we have an idea of what is impacting the neighborhoods. A lot of times I'm not paying attention to all these special events. These events just happen to us. We just wake up on Saturday morning and there's cars parking everywhere. So these things happen. Sometimes it's the residents don't understand what's going on or aren't aware of what events are going. But we need to make sure that people know what events are being scheduled. And I think having it reviewed by the PrAC Commission would be a little helpful.
I'd like to offer a few observations and then also share some feedback that we've received in Town Hall. And then I want to build, Paul, come back. I think there may be a opportunity to look at a phased-in approach, which I think, as Sam alluded to, is putting some criteria and then managing to the criteria rather than just managing to the event. So, but the first thing I will share with you is all parks are local, and the people that live closest to the parks either have a love-hate relationship with the activity that goes on in the park. So to the first point, we do get complaints about activity at Veterans Memorial Park, sometimes from the residents of the apartment complex and or the hotel for impact. So I'm just sharing with you, some residents think the park that they live next to is the only one that has an issue. You've heard complaints about the noise at Vineyard Park, and there's also the companion parking issue. But again, if you're not a user of Vineyard Park or you don't live in that neighborhood, you don't necessarily hear. We also have residents that are abutting Vanderleer Park. Again, a small park, passive, but heavily, in fact, probably on a per capita basis, more parking adjacent to that park and the residents than the park users generate. So I share that with everybody so they realize that trying to find that fine balance. And where I'm headed with this is I think perhaps coming up with criteria, frequency, for example, policy that you can't have 2 events on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So there's only one significant event, maybe limiting during a month to no more than 2, a town and another one. That may be a good interim way to sort of start this. And then maybe we encourage that the town and the town staff has tried that. We've tried to balance things between Yountville Community Park, which has been home to the movies, and then we put the music. So I think our staff is working on that, and then also balancing some of our other special events. So I do think that might be a healthy way to go. I will share, you know, I've been here in town now a long time, and I've attended a lot of Focus barbecues, events, and activities and things that, while Focus may not be doing that now, if we have a strict prohibition or ban against those things, those are things that started and worked out of Yountville Community Park. The Seroptimus, which again don't exist right now, the Kiwanis Club, all of them have had events and activities in the parks. And I think, you know, we need to, I think if we're really trying to understand, and I think Commissioner Tenscher, I think you said it well, which is what's the balancing point of the impact and the carrying capacity? And I think, you know, that you didn't quite say carrying capacity, but that's where where's that balance in the neighborhood? And have we overloaded it too much? And I would certainly point out, as Samantha did, if we have a Rock the Ride and a movie night, yeah, that doesn't look so good when we go back and look at it. And I think, you know, to me, that's where a good start might be, is what are those criteria? Because then we can manage them, and then we can tell somebody, all right, you know, Yountville Community Park is already booked in this 2-week window. You'd either have to move your date or your location to Veterans Memorial Park or not have it in Yountville. And then I think we can work on some criteria for carrying capacity. So what is the appropriate? Because we've been having the conversations with Rock the Ride about the fact that that event, as much as they love Yountville, want to come to Yountville, their success, and frankly, we have the same issue with the Alzheimer's Walk and the Be Kind Walk. Some of them are outgrowing our sites, and either they need to temper the event to the size that we have. So I'm just saying, I think, Paul, you were leaning towards what might that be, and that might be a good first step, and then we can continue to track and manage, because really, if you go off what Director Holland presented, we're managing about 6 non-town sponsored events that appear to have been at Yountville Community Park. Yeah. So that would give us some opportunity to better understand, and also, you know, try to understand the size capacity for the other, you know, park rentals and the, you know, smaller but cumulative, you know, if there's a 30 group picnic, family barbecue. So anyway, that might be a good starting spot for you.
I somewhat agree with that. And thank you, Steve, for saying that. I think there's another issue. We only have a 5-month period when the park is used, May through, well, basically April with the Easter egg hunt that's there, through October. And that's basically about 5 months. So we're looking at, if we have events once a month for a non-town event or nonprofit, or however the criteria is, that means there's only 5 separate events in the park or in the town. I'm not sure the town can really handle all this activity, which with a lot of stuff going on a normal weekend on things, if we're having these events every weekend. So ideally, probably one non-town event per month is probably a good starting point.
And then I think you could have no multiple events on a weekend. So, you know, these are the criteria. Mm-hmm. You know, if you have some other thoughts, we can certainly work on bringing them back to you. And, you know, I may encourage, and I haven't, you know, Samantha, you have permission to kick me later. But I think, you know, in the environment we are in right now, perhaps a special meeting out of your regular, so that we can kind of draft a policy, bring some stuff back for you, Just because the every 2 months, if that way we get ahead of the spring and event season so that people know. Does that, she hasn't thrown a dart at me yet, so I guess I'm okay, but.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, we could also give specific, direction on what that, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I think there need to be consensus on, if it's what you just said, which is, Paul, one non-town sponsored event per month and no events occurring on back-to-back weekends, regardless of who is sponsoring.
Yep. And I mean, if you're comfortable,
nights, I think I was saying, not back-to-back weekends necessarily. I think if the commission could look at that, it might be okay. Something like the Thomas Keller event, which took place on a Tuesday evening, is not that impactful. It's a family, it's an employee party, basically. The impact is not as great as a Friday night movie and then a Saturday night large event. That impact is very different. Just to get back to this, I think we probably should have another non-scheduled or whatever it is special meeting to try and hash out just the details of what we want to do with this policy.
Okay.
I have a comment, Paul, but kind of to get back in what you said earlier about 5 events during this 5-month period. In reality, if half of them were at Veterans Park and half at the Young Adult Community Park, two or three at each end, there's 6 in 3 1 month, 3 different every other month. I don't think it would impact everybody quite as much. However, I do have a little issue with the point of the PrAC Commission having to verify, review these various events. Most of these people are doing these events in advance. We only meet once every 2 months, but by that time, their event planning is over with, their insurance liability. I think you should with the Parks and Rec Department, not to be overseen each event by the commission itself.
I think the benefit of setting the criteria is that it could prevent that. And I was thinking in general, at our every other month meeting, I'm happy to give an update on what is coming up or what has been turned in, pending applications. It could be something that's on your agenda for update every 2 months. I included in our last packet the lengthy process of applying for a special event application, and it goes to any affected department and law enforcement for review. And I think that as long as we're clear with what we're doing policy-wise, I'm not sure, adding that extra step for the PrAC to go through those is necessarily a good use of everyone's time. As long as staff is clear and the recommendation and the policy and the council agrees and approves, obviously, that, as long as that's being followed, I'm not sure that would need to come before you. So.
But that makes sense.
I agree.
I've got just based on what I'm hearing, I've got a few thoughts for your criteria, because if you're comfortable with that, then as Samantha has recommended, we can kind of move forward. But I think one, we're hearing no back-to-back Friday, Saturday, Sunday events on one weekend. And then secondly, no back-to-back weekends. You follow me? Those are 2 separate things. Yes. So, and then I think the other thing that would be helpful, and maybe Samantha, you have a better, what would be are we talking events over 100?
So the special event, the current special event municipal code notes 200. It's an event size of 200 or more.
Okay.
Or the other part is or has things that are not generally included in a park reservation. So they're bringing in tenting, or there's going to be other impacts that are not part of a typical picnic site rental. So
I think at that point, it's like limiting the use of other people in the park who may be using the park with a special event, because it takes up all the space available in the park. So I think we need to also look at that criteria too on having a special event basically takes over the park. Other events don't.
So would you want to analyze dropping that number of what would require a special event permit? So for example, if someone rents site 3 and 4 at the park together, that would be 150 person capacity. So that's really the most any reservation event can have, but we can talk about limiting that even further. So currently the municipal code for special event kicks in at that a group of 200 or a group that's impacting the park outside of a normal picnic reservation. So
that's okay with me.
okay.
Alan, did you have a question or something?
I did. So Samantha, how does it work that there could be a special event and then also the picnic reservations? Because I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is the overall impact on a particular weekend. So if we have a special event on a Friday and then somebody rents 3 and 4 on Saturday and somebody rents 3 and 4 again on Sunday, how do you sort of manage that?
So currently, I mean, we manage it on the day. So let's say there's a special event in Yountville Community Park. We're not going to rent out we're not going to reserve any of the picnic sites that day. But we're not currently managing what that could look like the next day or the next day. So we're not limiting, we're not looking at it like that for just picnic site reservations at this point.
Do you think, commissioners, that is something that would be important if we're interested in trying to balance and smooth over the intensity of use that is causing some consternation? Is there interest in looking at both of those together?
I think in order to get a clear picture, we need to take that into account. I don't know if it needs to be a policy set up at that point, but I don't know how many people actually would reserve spots 3 and 4 on successive weekends. In my personal experience, I haven't seen it that many times. I've seen a couple of parties happening. The majority use for me, in my observation, is picnic area 1, which is the main use, which is right next to the playground for birthday parties, and picnic area 2, which is a nice area, kind of a middle ground place. 3 and 4 get used only on big events, and it's not that frequent as far as I don't see that as an issue personally.
Paul, I agree with that. I go up there, drive by or walk up there, or bike ride up there on weekends, and I don't see, in general, outside of the big events, that all of the picnic areas, whether at Community Park or down at Veterans Park, are really overused or used on 2 consecutive days.
Yeah, I would say, thinking back, to our last normal year, I would say that combined rental of the reservation of the 2 sites for a larger group maybe happens twice a year. I wouldn't think it would be many more than that. And based on that, we can internally have a policy where we then analyze what's going on around that. So when a reservation comes in for the combined sites with a larger attendance, we can look at what's happening already on the calendar around that before we make that reservation happen. So
yeah, I also think, given Samantha's idea that she'll include an update on usage, that this will allow you and staff to sort of see, are there some trends that we want to monitor and get ahead of? And I would also suggest that your policy be applicable to both Veterans Memorial Park and Yountville Community Park,
and
they're
also
sort of
the Vineyard Park. I would say we have to make it, even though Vineyard Park doesn't have near the impact, I think we need to kind of be inclusive so that we're not going back and doing things. We may need to revise it as we get more data, but I think we need to make it apply to the Vineyard Park at that point if we can. I mean, it doesn't get the same
Well, I think
special event, but it does get some use.
So the only things we don't reserve anything in Vineyard Park. The only thing that we do give is wedding permit applications. And that is limited to a very small number of people, but we have allowed, I think, one special wedding of a resident who lived in that neighborhood under the special event permitting process. So we don't generally permit anything in that park.
Okay.
So,
and that's a good question, but that's because they're impacted as it is by the sports courts, the exercise. So that is sort of their thing, and we don't generally. And that site, to be perfectly honest, that park was not set up and developed. Just like, you know, we haven't talked about Forester Park, but that's because Forester Park is not set up to be a what I would call a community park, whereas both Yountville Community Park and Veterans Memorial Park, you know, their history and their focus have that community as opposed to a neighborhood approach. And I know people are going to mix words, but they're in the parks business. A community park and a neighborhood park are actually there's a definition and a structure towards that. Mm-hmm. And both Veterans Memorial and Yountville Community Park are classified as community parks.
Okay.
So I just wanted to get for a point of clarification on drafting this new policy. So we discussed, is that okay with you, Paul, if I kind of recap for a second?
Yes,
I did have one question. So we're talking about limiting to one non-town sponsored event per month. No events can take place on back-to-back days. So is that no events town-wide or no events in a specific park? So that's my question. And that also goes along with no events can take place on back-to-back weekends. And is that in the same park or town-wide with the parks? So that's kind of one of the things I'm not clear about we're talking town-wide, which basically would be Veterans Park or Yountville Community Park, but we also have some special events that happen at the community center that don't use a park specifically. So are we talking the parks only, and then is it individual parks? So those are kind of the questions that I still have based on.
Yeah, I wouldn't limit it to both parks as far as saying there's only one event. If you had an event on a Friday night at the community park and another event on Sunday at the Veterans Park, I don't think that would conflict with the situation. So I think we need to look at it, the details a little bit better. Which is why I'm kind of thinking, okay, we're getting together here, and I think we need to have some kind of a workshop, special meeting to kind of go through these ideas on this particular subject and really get a good policy together.
Yeah, I know Steve had mentioned doing a special meeting, but I think with the holidays and everything, our next meeting would be in January already. So I kind of feel like just waiting until January is okay. I think people's calendars might be stretched.
I do think that's a good point, Sam, and thinking about that. And maybe what we can do is take a stab at having a really good draft, and then maybe we could find some samples from some other communities, and you all can take a look at adding or deleting. I'd also recommend you're making some programmatic changes, and we can do these incrementally. And I do hear a caution on the part of the commission about wanting to be balanced. So we can start with something, evaluate if it's hitting the mark. And then because if we start looking at, for example, banning and restricting events, then that's got to go more to the council. So I think where you're staying right now is all pretty, policies that are pretty much within the purview of the Park and Rec Advisory Commission. And again, I think I'm hearing from you sensitivity, and yet wanting to make sure that we're making positive incremental change that's going to benefit the neighbors and the community.
Yes, I agree. And I'd like to, even if we don't have the meeting, if Sam, you could email it or give it to all the commissioners so we can maybe feedback before the meeting, if we can, so we can kind of progress more on this rather than having it go 2 months before we think about this again.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Just as a reminder, don't reply to all when I send you anything. So can't have a serial meeting. You can't talk to each other about it. But you know, sending a draft around, I think is workable. So what I'm getting though from you, because I feel like for me, this is kind of an important point, is that we're really looking at per site for some of these limitations. So no events can take place on back-to-back days per site, or weekends per site, and then one non-town sponsored event per month per site. So that is helpful, and I think is very equitable as far as how things can affect the neighbors, whether it's at the community center or the North Park or the South Park or wherever it happens to be. I think that is a very equitable approach. So that's helpful to me.
Yes.
Could you clarify again? I know you said before, I know people can make reservations. Is it 6 months or is it 3 months, the forms that they fill out?
They can make a park reservation for a picnic site up to a year in advance. And they can also apply for a special event permit a year in advance. We'll take park site reservations, up until the Friday before. But special event applicants are required to submit 60 days prior. So
Thanks.
it's the least, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we have pretty much the idea of the direction we want to go with this subject here. I don't think we need to make a motion or anything to do this. I think we need to progress and continue the study and come up with a good plan. So I appreciate everybody's input, and I hope we get more input as we get this discussion going, and kind of have something ready to go in January, although we're not really pushed to have this right away because 2021 is not really happening very quickly, but at least we can be ready for the following year. So I think that's very good. With that, I think we should probably go on to the next item of discussion, which is the update fees on picnic site reservations. There again, Samantha, you did a very good report on this.
Thank you. So yeah, I just included in for your review, generally speaking, the commission hasn't reviewed fees, but I think it's a great idea. I did do some research as far as how surrounding cities do, how they handle it and what they charge. Some of them are a little confusing. But it should hopefully give you a little bit of a picture on, where we sit. And really the discussion you had at your September meeting was around, how we charge residents versus non-residents. And there was some public comment regarding making sure that it's accessible for all residents to reserve a park picnic site area. And so, as I said, I did a little bit of market research at that point and included it. And then I did include Yountville's, which is at the very top, which we currently, for sites 1, 2, and 5, which is a capacity of 50, we charge $45 for residents, $167 for non. Sites 3 and 4 each hold $75, so we charge $71 for residents and $224 for non-residents. I did want to point out that we do not require a security deposit. And when I started here, we required a security deposit, and we've required it for quite a few years, up until 2 years ago when we did some analysis and realized that in the 8 years that I had been there, we had only withheld a security deposit partially one time. And the amount of money administratively that it costs to take in that $100 deposit and then turn around and issue a refund check for it it's a lengthy process in the town, and decided that we would move to a credit card hold deposit policy. So when someone makes a park site reservation, they have to do so with a credit card that we keep on file in our very secure system in the event that there is any damage damage or issues, we notify the client that they will be billed for those before we do it. So I just wanted to let you know why we have a no security deposit required policy. And also, it just assists us internally. That was mainly the issue, and it's not something that we regularly have ever used. So we had 2 full years under that new policy before COVID, and we did not have any issues. So I just wanted to report that out. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or if there's any input from the commission on analyzing that, and just a little bit of how our fees and charges work. So any changes to fees and charges through the town above the annual CPI do have to move forward through to the council for review and approval before they can be implemented. And then there's a waiting period before they can go into effect. So
I have a quick question. Sam, first of all, once again, you have a comment from Pam Reeves regarding,
yes.
I don't know if you want to read that in or not. But I also definitely appreciate, as Paul did, the work you put into it. And more specifically, your last comment regarding that we are not using security deposits currently for the exact reason you said, but more importantly, we're using a credit card hold, which in reality, as far as I'm concerned, is the same as a security deposit. So I don't really think security deposits are required because of that. And if you want to read what Pam said, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want me to go ahead and read that into the record, Paul?
Put that in the record first before we get
Okay.
too far in our discussion.
So regarding item 7B, dear commissioners, I would like to comment on the fee structure for use of designated areas in our parks. I would like to suggest that fees paid by non-residents can remain the same, but with a $100 security deposit added to protect the town from loss of revenue after reserving space that is not used. I would like to suggest that resident fees should be nominal to account for paperwork only. I suggest that $25 for reservations of all reservable areas in Yampa parks is adequate and reasonable to help those in the community who are less affluent. These fees would help keep the park as an affordable community resource rather than a constantly escalating pay-to-play structure. Please consider all residents in your deliberation. These fees should not be about cost recovery. Parks have long been a resource that is expected to be supported by community funds. Any fee should only be able to make the reservations valuable enough to keep and use, to provide skin in the game, not to subsidize the game. Thank you for considering my comments. Pam Reeves, Jefferson Street, Yountville.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments here? Or
I think just on the contrary, I think our fees are very reasonable for the resident fee for that. I mean, for someone trying to get to a gathering to rent someplace or to go to a restaurant, or whatever you would try to do for 50 people or 75, that $45 resident fee and 71, I think is very lenient. And I guess I think we're doing a great job with what those fees are right now. That's very low when you compare it to looking at Napa and St. Helena, those other areas. So I think what they put together is good. Great. Another comment, I'm just going to look on this, the site. Oh, I've got, never mind, Sam. So I know when you do the bocce court, so when they do site B for the after site 5 up there, that's just, there's a flat fee for that, how many courts that you use, right? And the equipment.
Yeah, so we actually stopped doing the equipment rentals because we were not getting it back in good shape. So, but when you can do site 5, and then it's $12 for each court for residents, and I believe it's $36 for non-residents per court. So yeah, you add the courts on.
Okay. Alan, did you have a comment?
Yeah. I would concur. I mean, $45 and $70 seems pretty reasonable. I mean, it's less than $1 a person. And, but I did want to ask Samantha, if you have any sense, I would think it would, I mean, you talked about the challenge in terms of the administrative overhead of taking in a security deposit. How much does it cost to rent one of these sites. I would think you're approaching it with your $45 right now.
Yeah, so I can guarantee you that $45 is, or I think what you're asking is how much does it cost the town to rent out a site? So when you take into consideration the administrative staff time, but then also the garbage, we pick up all the garbage and recycling. So that's manpower and the fees, because town pays garbage fees, of course. And then as well as the use of the restrooms and, the water there. And then also what it costs us to maintain those areas, the restrooms and the park sites and everything. So at $45, I can guarantee you we're probably not even approaching cost recovery at all. For a 4-hour park site rental, the town is definitely continuing to subsidize that use, and that would go for we're much closer. I would think with the non-resident fees, we're probably pretty close, but still not making money per se at all. So.
And Alan and commissioners, I'd like to point out that the council's policy and direction to staff long-term has not been to make money as a profit center out of our park rentals. And that's across the board, all of our facilities and various things. And I think as Sam's alluding to, again, if we are, we're not doing a good job of it because we aren't doing cost recovery. But that hasn't been our objective and our goal. I do think it needs to be significant enough, as was pointed out by one of the speakers, so that we don't have people just reserving and then nothing happens. So we have that. The other thing is there will be an item just behind this where, again, these are the reservable sites, and we're still talking about the fact that there are drop-in sites that are available first come, first serve that have no costs. So there are opportunities for residents or whomever is visiting the park to use the picnic table without a cost. And then we are completely subsidizing that visit and all the cost recovery that Director Holland referred to.
Thank you, Steve. I just have two quick questions. I was a little bit unclear because I was observing on the other cities' fee structure, they had a half day and a full day. Is ours a full day or is it just a half day that we're renting it for?
So we consider our park rentals to be 4-hour blocks of time, but we never do back-to-back rentals on the same day. So it's possible that people might stay a little bit longer.
Yeah, I was unclear of that issue on that thing. But it usually is people wouldn't start until 10, 11 o'clock and somebody going off to the evening. That would be kind of a little difficult to do. The other thing is there a cancellation policy once you make the reservation there? How late can you cancel and get your money back?
So we have a 30-day cancellation policy, and then after that 30 days, they do not receive a refund on their fees unless there is, and then the only caveat to that is if it's a weather-related cancellation, then we ask them to reschedule, and then at the very last, the last case scenario is that we give their money back if we can't find an amiable date.
Okay.
Excuse me, so.
That seems like a reasonable policy as far as I'm concerned. I don't have any other questions. And
I did just want to point out quickly, based on the public comment letter, that if people if they reserve the space and they don't show up, they then are just we're just getting their fee. So they're forfeiting the fee anyways if they choose to not show up. So.
And I don't think I've ever seen that they won't show up. Okay. I don't see any issue to really pursue on this one.
Okay.
I don't get the sense that anybody wants to change the fees structure here. I think it's probably reasonable at this time. So at that point, we'll go on to item C, the last part of the administrative part. And there again,
Here I am again.
Nice report.
I promise someone else is going to talk soon. So John, are you warming up? John's warming up. So another item that we discussed at the September meeting was the availability of drop-in picnic areas in our park system. So these are areas that cannot be reserved, but they are equipped for picnicking, tables and such, and they're not a formal picnic area that can be reserved. So if you just show up at the park with your family and want to have a table available to you, so that's kind of what we were discussing. And so I just, in the staff report, I took a little time to kind of show you what is current, what is potentially for the future, ideas that we've discussed internally, as well as what is actually planned already in the CIP. So for Yountville Community Park, we currently have 3 passive drop-in picnic tables. So people can also drop in and use the open grass area at any time. Those are not part of any picnic or park reservation. There's 1 picnic bench located under the redwood trees that's just adjacent to the playground. And then there are 2 at the south end of the park adjacent to the restroom area. So potentially, I had spoken with park staff earlier this year, and then I included that here in this document there. So the green circles in your staff report are those current areas. The yellow ones are ones that we've discussed. And so it's a little difficult at Yountville Community Park because our park picnic site areas are those areas that have been specifically constructed for picnic tables, right? And we don't have a whole lot of areas outside of that that wouldn't that would without some more major renovation, like removing the turf and putting down a solid surface, we can't just plop a picnic table in the middle of the grass, because that becomes a really difficult issue when we're mowing the grass or doing ongoing maintenance. So kind of looking at it strategically with the public works team, we did note that the yellow circle, again, adjacent to the picnic, or excuse me, to the playground, is a potential. There was a table there at one time. It's not a very shaded area, so people took it upon themselves to kind of move it around, which is why it found its new home over here in the shade by the playground on the other end. We also discussed under this tree here right off of Lincoln Avenue, also at the north end of the park, that there is a space there that could potentially just be dug out and have some gravel put in, and so that the mower doesn't have to try to get around it. So those are 2 potential sites internally that we've discussed. And obviously that is, open for any kind of comment from you guys as well. Veterans Memorial Park, we currently have 6 full-size passive drop-in picnic tables and 4 smaller tables. So the 4 full-size picnic tables are located at the north end of the bocce courts and are not part of the reservation system, reservation of the bocce courts or the picnic areas in Site 5. So the 2 other full-size tables are located along the north end of the park path, west of the grassy portion of the amphitheater, so more towards the north end. And then in the actual amphitheater plaza, there are 4 other tables. So 2 have seating for 4 people, and 2 are more of a gaming table that have seating for 2. And then there's a lot of ample grass space for use there as well. So Veterans Park planned. So Public Works staff have it in the work plan to improve the west side of the park along the fence line. We have had discussions about that, including decomposed granite, adding passive use tables and benches, as well as a cornhole game to that area. So the current specification allows for 2 added full-size picnic tables, as well as 2 standalone seating benches. So those are indicated in the orange there on the graphic that I included in the staff report. Do you want me to put that up on the screen? Is that easier? Do you want me to, or do you guys have it in front of you?
Hey, does everybody have the?
Okay. Perfect. And so that area is currently planned, and we decided, 2 picnic tables would be great, not just for use of the cornhole or whatever there, but because it's also adjacent to the volleyball court, which gets quite a bit of use in a normal year. So when John first came here, we met out there and kind of outlined this project. So it's in the work plan. And then the green dots obviously show you Veterans Memorial Park, where the drop-in areas are.
And
so I didn't,
Sam,
yeah.
I was going to say, there is one more picnic table we're also recommending. I'm sorry, that is as a result of the keeping the restrooms open here. The thought was that, and you can kind of see, it would be by the restroom. South of the restroom, there's already DG and a couple tables. The thought was, if this is going to be the primary place we're encouraging drivers and whatnot, that we may want to have a table there. So that is something that we were just having with Public Works as well. So, but that's a direct correlation, outgrowth of the conversation regarding the restroom locks that you all had encouraged, Veterans Memorial Park being the one that stays open.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Steve. And then at Vineyard Park, we currently have one picnic table and a small barbecue that's located east of the basketball court and the fitness equipment. And we also have one picnic table at the north end of the park, and there are multiple sitting benches adjacent to the tennis and pickleball courts, as well as 3 additional at the north end of the park as well. So Vineyard Park planned, this came up in our meeting in September. It's included in the CIP, is the Vineyard Park Path Plan, and it's slated for final design in 21-22 and construction in 22-23. And so this construction included another passive drop-in user picnic site with 3 tables on the south side of the courts and a connecting path that goes around the perimeter of the back side of the park. So you probably remember this conversation when we renovated the courts. We approached the project in multiple phases so that we could spread out the cost of that. And so that is currently in the CIP. I also included in yellow potential future uses. So we could definitely look at adding a picnic table near where the existing benches are now outside the tennis and pickleball courts if we felt like that was something warranted, and potentially in the grass area near the basketball courts. I think we actually also have room for another full picnic table where some of those seated benches are at the north end of the park. So obviously there is fiscal impact to anything that we look at for potential future, and that would be something that we would move forward in the budget process as we work on that for the future. And then if at all possible, with current funds, you know, if we have them available, we can look at some replacement as we move things around as well. Happy to answer any questions or give any, take any feedback that you might have.
I have one more comment again, Sam. This is again in regards to the comment from Pam Reeves regarding 7C. If you need to read that as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So item 7C, dear commissioners, I'm in agreement that there should be additional drop-in picnic areas at our town parks. The plans submitted seem to be reasonable, but I think the plan for the community park is a bit on the light side. It is a very heavily used park and deserves to have more places for people to sit and enjoy. Therefore, I'm suggesting 2 things. Perhaps the commission should consider whether there will be enough shade from trees on the western side of the park to locate a couple of picnic benches there. If there is not enough trees, perhaps the PRAC should request that more trees of shade caliber should be planted there to provide good shade for tables there. 2, I would also suggest that some park benches could be installed in a few locations under the redwoods facing the grass area or on the western grassy area if tables would not fit there. There is an added possibility of starting a program for dedicating benches in parks to residents in their memory or as a tribute for a dedication fee. This could start in the community park and perhaps spread to other park areas in town. Benches can act as easy respite for walkers and can double as picnic sites in a pinch. Benches can add value to the experience of both resident and the visitor. Thank you for considering my comments. Pam Reeves, Jefferson Street.
What I would say with regards to part of those comments is the west area, if we'll use in Yountville Community Park, there is certainly room for us to look at potentially siting another picnic table and or a couple benches that would be benefit of shade with some of the landscaping that is going in. So that is certainly something that can be done.
I just have one comment because I noticed that the playground has 2 benches there, one kind of in the playground area itself and one in the trees kind of to the east of where the current table is. There's
Yes.
two benches there. Another bench at the other side by the restroom might be good because that's the other end of the park. And since playground area, with the younger children and the swings are down there, separation of that because that one bench gets used almost every time there's people in the park because that's where people put their belongings, their lunch snacks, whatever it is, jackets, purses, and has that and sit. So another bench in the playground area would, or 2 benches would be helpful. Not necessarily a picnic table, but benches itself.
Yeah, we could definitely look at that. There's a lot of specifications about fall zones and stuff like that of anything we put in playgrounds. So we'd have to do some analysis on that. But I think that's a valuable point, Chair.
Alan?
Director Holland, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going back a few years, so I believe we have a policy in place with regards to donations and various things. So the comment by the speaker, we do have a program. So if there's somebody interested, the good news is we have that. We can certainly work with them. And again, I would also just point out, we really can't go to Home Depot and buy a bench from Home Depot and put it in the park. So we do have to look at ADA, liability, security, installation. So, but we do have a policy and program in place. And maybe what we should do, Sam, is put that on for a future agenda just so that the commission is aware of that.
Great. I noticed, all these plans. Is it going to be put in the budget to purchase some of these tables in the future? I'm not quite sure whether this is future planning. I know it takes time to put it in the budget and then go ahead and purchase it and put it in the ground. Are these?
Yeah. So the ones that I indicated as future, like mainly a Vineyard Park, those are already in the CIP for the future. So that will come up when that project comes up in the CIP. Some of the additions at Veterans Park that I outlined is currently in the work plan. That has been budgeted for. But anything that we add for discussion or future would need to come up in the next budget year.
Okay.
And this is why it's good timing actually for some of your input, because then we can refine that, include that in the budgets. And then typically these are the types of things that would get purchased soon and installed early in the fiscal year. They'd be ready to go. We'd know what we're ordering, and with approval of the budget, they'd be ordered, and then the parks team would install them fairly quickly. So there wouldn't be, if you feel this is something you want to advocate for, then that would be presented as part of the budget discussion.
Yeah, because I do think that individual benches, especially in this time of the pandemic, people need open space, but they also need to be distanced. So they need to have a gathering. And if you have limited benches all clustered in certain areas, it kind of limits your ability to have major use. And just for general knowledge, at the community park, right, the redwood trees, right where the Yountville Park sign label is right there, a lot of people set out blankets and have a picnic right there. It's an ideal spot. They enjoy it. They can have separated by the trees so they can have 2 groups of people out there. And I don't think a bench is worth putting there, but we need to look at areas where we can have individuals have their families and yet be safe. So.
Exactly. I think there are some areas that we think are optimal, but as you recall, we had a whole picnic site under the redwoods adjacent to the playground at one point, and we were advised by the arborist that we needed to move that because we moved into the new site because of the impact to the root system and the trees was too much, and we weren't able to put in an ADA accessible surface under there. So when we're looking at these new sites, we do have to take those things into consideration. And although every site doesn't have to be ADA accessible because we have that option elsewhere, it still needs to be safe and approachable, to all. So, those are different things that we take into consideration. And then also the maintenance of it, putting a bench on the grass is not necessarily feasible because we have to mow that grass. So we would have to put a solid surface down first. And so there is kind of a process. It's not as easy as just going and putting a bench out. We have to really analyze it, and that's John's job. So I'm thankful for him.
Okay, so I think I'd like to just comment park by park, just to make sure I'm on the right page. Excuse me. So at Community Park, it seems like Samantha has mentioned there are two possibilities. It doesn't seem like the neighbors have any issue with the one that's right across Lincoln Street from one of the houses. So that's fine with me. Seems like a nice spot. And then if I understood Steve correctly, on the west side of the park, perhaps under the redwood trees, halfway between the north and the south part of the park, there's an opportunity for another one in there. If I've understood all that correctly, it seems fine with me. With respect to the park, Veterans Park, that all seems fine too, with the two additional ones that, if I've understood correctly, are already budgeted, so not much to discuss there. With respect to Vineyard Park, there's 3 yellow dots, which the one right next to the courts, I wonder if that would actually encroach on the rubber mat. So that one's a little bit of a concern to me. Maybe a certain kind of table could go in there, maybe a metal table with, some sort of synthetic top as opposed to some sort of wooden bench might be more appropriate there. I like the idea of the one not too far from the basketball court. That seems to be a good spot, except that it's going to be very sunny. And similarly, maybe the other one near the benches at certain times of day might be pretty sunny, but those all seem fine to me with the caveat of the sun and the proximity to the rubber mat.
What I would point out on Vineyard Park, the very northern dot that you're talking about right now is actually set up the DG space is large enough that a second picnic table could be put there without having a whole lot of negative impact. It's just large enough, and it will be both of those potential locations. And it may be, again, when we're looking at potential, there are benches and other activities at the sports courts, and maybe we look at whether a bench or something is more appropriate, if needed even, based on utilization rather than a table, because we are anticipating bringing those. The 3 dots are probably closer to the vineyard, but when we look at it, so there is some activity there, and maybe we just start with the one where the surface is already capable of supporting it before we put all the additional work to provide a table surface.
Steve, make sure I understand correctly, please. So the Acousta-Fence is also going to be on the side closest to the rubber mat. Is that correct?
That is correct. The Acousta-Fence will be, you're doing 3 sides, and you've got the little, I call the zigzag. So you've got the mat, the restroom sides. So they're still to finish, and then open to the vineyard. So the installation is they're almost finished with and this is, I didn't see if they were able to do anything today, but the south part of by the pickleball is about 80% done, leaving only the part by the bathroom left to go. So we're a day or two, 3 at most, with our part-time hours allocation to getting that wrapped up.
Yeah, thank you. My point was more, if the Acoustafence is there, I'm not sure what value a bench, or if it faced the courts, a table or a bench wouldn't have much value. You'd just be looking at the Acoustafence.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying we may find that right now that area, the good news is where we're moving the proposed future path and picnic area is on the open side and the vineyard side. So maybe we just wait on that. That's a great observation. And there's already a little bit of bench capacity around the mat and the exercise. So maybe that's adequate for that period. And we can, further evaluate that later on.
Noted.
Okay. So these proposed plans, do we need to take action on what you are proposing or are currently thinking about?
No, if there's anything for the future, and I've made notes, that'll come forward with John and Joe's CIP discussion in January, I believe, when we talk about future CIP. So we will bring back any notes with that when you guys discuss, what's coming up and what you want to see added. So if there's any other thoughts, I think I've pretty much collected some of the notes that we discussed. And if you think of anything else, or if you're out there walking, obviously we'll have this discussion again, not in its longest format, but within the CIP format in January.
I appreciate that. I think the only idea I was thinking about is maybe a bench or two someplace else in the community park to maybe help have not a picnic table, but something like that, to see if that would fit into the plan. And with the Vineyard Park, I would like to see some maybe some benches or something like that, maybe around the pickleball court. Now, I'm not quite sure how that would work, as Alan said about how the sound baffling is working. So I would like to see something in January that we could kind of move forward on. Are we in agreement with that?
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that and work on that for the future, for that future item.
Sam, just another, I was just put on the back the brochure that's really helpful, that's got the park reservations there. So I know that when you walk by it, but so like at the Hopper Creek, the pocket park, there, I mean, there's a couple of tables. I was trying to think, there's seems like there's a lot, there's 2 or 3.
Yeah, there's a lot out there that we didn't even talk about. So
they're there.
We do have Hopper Creek Pocket Park has tables. There's also quite a bit of benches, seating benches, and then 2 tables at Vandeleur Park. There's tables at Forester Park. There's table at the bench at the Tot Lot. We don't, obviously a lot of seating there at the community center as well. So, we have a lot of seating in areas that aren't in what was that?
Oak Circle Park.
Oak Circle Park has, quite a few benches. So yeah.
All drop in, all free.
Yeah. So when you focus on the park system as a whole and not just kind of the 3 most highly used, then yeah, we do. We offer quite a bit.
I think a lot of times on the weekends, I'll notice at Oak Circle, there'll be a lot of folks that have gone to Addendum and brought their lunch over, and they're utilizing that. So it's nice.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Well, I think, Vice Chair Shemang, you bring up a really good thing. So many folks, like you say, we have pockets of parks scattered throughout, and they become focused on a park, not realizing there's a system. And again, we have a lot of opportunities for free drop-in utilization. And we're trying to be, again, responsive to the conversation about, in a couple of our more higher utilized areas, do we want to look at doing that? And you're hearing from staff and the commission that yes, there's some capacity to add some additional free drop-in spots. So, there'll be a budget impact, but we'll work on putting, some will be taken care of because they're already in discussion. And then some will put in and put as a consideration for the upcoming fiscal year budget.
Because Vandeleur also is busy all the time as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just had to say this, that there is, we talk about all the parks, but there's even a Hopper Creek little area with the French Laundry Garden, that park in there, little bench there, and Vandeleur Park with a couple tables. All of them get used quite a bit. You can always tell because the Bouchon Bakery bags are all over the place in all the garbage cans. So you know how well used they are. So.
Thank you, Paul. If we're ready to move on, I did receive one general public comment email that I can read into the record.
Please do.
Okay. To the PRAC general public comment, I am deeply saddened by what is occurring at Community Park regarding the parking renovations. The wall that is being built is very high, and I believe it will negatively change the cherished character of our local park. 2, I'm also saddened and disappointed to learn that the oak bench that was at the north end of Jefferson Street that was out for repair and promised to be returned has been lost or discarded per Joe Tagliabashi and John. Sincerely, Margene Marcidiak, Yountville.
Thank you, Samantha.
Mm-hmm.
With that, we will move on to the next item, which is the staff report. And I think, John Ferrons, you're probably finally on.
Good evening, everybody. Bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that and still hear me.
Yes.
So, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I am John Ferns, your Deputy Public Works Director, and I am proud to present an update, a mid-year update on our capital improvement projects specific to Parks and Recreation. We have a multitude of projects going on, but I wanted to focus on obviously what's important for the Parks and Recs Department, Park and Recreation Advisory Commission. So jumping right in, my screen's not changing. Why isn't it going? Uh-oh. Bear with me as I work through my technical difficulties. There we go. So first project I would like to report about, which we're proud of, is the Hopper Creek Pedestrian Bridge and Path Project. This is the last section of the programmed Hopper Creek Path that connects what you just mentioned, Oak Circle Park, to Mission Street. The view that you see here is the actual path that's been constructed. We're looking south towards Mission Street. The fence on the right is the backside of Addendum, and the parking lot that you can see in the foreground and the distance is the West America Bank parking lot. So this project is obviously under construction. It began in September-ish and has been moving along. There's two components of it. There's the path and a pedestrian bridge. Due to COVID challenges with steel and factory production, the bridge has been ordered. It's being manufactured off-site. So it's currently scheduled to be delivered on or around February 1st. So the contractor is currently wrapping up and cleaning up the site now and doing some guardrail work on the creek side, as well as planting on the fence side that you see in this view. And then we're going to pause the project until the bridge is available and can be installed. So it's under construction. The funding for this particular project is a state transportation improvement program grant that we qualified for up to $500,000. The contractor that bid the project bid it at $260,000. So we're well under that grant value. And the schedule, as I just discussed, the path is complete. They're doing some site work now that's going to finish up. And then we're going to come back in 2021, February-ish, to install the bridge. So moving on to the next project and jumping over to Yountville Community Park. You've heard about this project in the past and we're moving forward with it. It's the project to remove the existing single stall restroom on the north end of the park by the playgrounds and replace it with a 2-stall restroom. This project is going to be funded by Prop 68 state grant funds. We're in the process of compiling all the information to apply for those grant funds. We're in essentially that puts us in the planning and design phase of the project. Sam and I are working on the application together to get all the information in, and we're very optimistic that that will come together and construction can begin in spring of 2021. Next project, same park, only this is technically not park, it's adjacent to the park, but it's Washington Street parking. So this rendering that you see shows where the parking is going to go along the easterly edge of Washington Street at the west edge of the park, but it's technically a street parking project. It is currently under construction. The wall is being constructed now. It is not specifically a town capital improvement project. Rather, it is a project that's being constructed under a settlement agreement with a local business who needs to construct the parking to meet their parking requirements for the business that's operating in town. They're moving along quite well. The wall is being constructed now. They're currently planning on paving in early December. They're going to grade next week and then be paving in early December and then doing the planting. And to a conversation that you had earlier, the westerly edge of the park, in between the park and this street parking, is getting heavily planted with new landscaping as well as trees. So we removed 6 trees. We're actually replacing it with 18 trees in and along that buffer. So that will help to improve the interface between the park and the parking. So that one's moving along. It's important to note that they are required to underground the overhead utilities that span above this parking area. The challenge there is we have to deal with PG&E and we're subject to PG&E's schedule. So we've met with PG&E. They're telling us it's a 12 to 18 month design cycle for them before the undergrounding can occur. So the contractor that's constructing this now is going to make provisions so that undergrounding can occur at a later date, and then we'll finish the formal surface of the parking lot. And when I say that, I mean, when we pave or when a project like this gets paved, we pave in multiple lifts. So we would leave the top lift off, stripe it, it can be used as a parking lot. And when the undergrounding comes along, we can install the underground facilities and then put that final lift on and put the final striping on, and it'll look brand new. Moving on to another conversation that we had earlier, Vineyard Park sports courts, the acoustic fence. This is a picture of the acoustic fence going up. I say it's under construction. It's better to say it's being installed. On the right-hand side of this picture, you'll see where the acoustic fence is installed, and beyond the acoustic fence is the rubberized mat area where your picnic tables could go. We appreciate the public's patience in the installation of this. It takes a 3-man crew and a man lift to lift and get the panels oriented and level, and then they have to stainless steel clips that they stitch down the side. So you have 2 guys on the inside of the fence and 1 guy on a ladder on the outside of the fence. They can do about 5 a day. And in the middle of the picture, you see it rolled out there. So the first thing to do is they roll it out and let the heat warm it up, which makes it easier to install. And as Steve said, they're on schedule to complete this before Thursday, a week from today. The funding for this, as you're aware, came from a mid-year budget adjustment from council to allow purchase and install of this product. Another exciting feature, which is not really a project, but it's something that affects all the parks, is our Ventrac mower with attachments. We just purchased this. It's already been in use. And the important thing is it was purchased from a grant from Upper Valley Waste Management Authority. They were seeking to fund projects or things that would reduce waste to the landfill. So this mower has multiple mulching blades, so it mulches the grass in place and eliminates the need or eliminates the volume of grass clippings that get collected, ultimately dumped in a truck, ultimately delivered to the landfill. It also has, you don't see it in this picture, but it also has a giant leaf vacuum and a giant blower. So they're able to manage the leaves. And like I said, this just, we just put this one in service, and it's just in time for leaf season. That if everybody was out today, you saw leaf season is definitely upon us. Finally, we talked about this a little bit this evening as well. The park's public restrooms automatic locking. We've purchased the materials. This also was a mid-year budget adjustment. The installation of these locks is in the queue behind the Acoustifence installation. So once our crews are done hanging the Acoustifence and that's all wrapped up, they'll begin this process. As if you recall, the goal is to put these security devices on the locks at Yountville Community Park, Vineyard Park restrooms, and also the sports courts at Vineyard Park. And ultimately, the locks will be programmed to unlock and lock at sunrise and sunset, adjustable with dusk and dawn and time changes and things like that. But with, as you know, an electronic system can be managed fairly easily. So once they're installed, we'll get the program in place, and then we can adjust it as we need to. And I think that we're going to put a locking mechanism on the Veterans Park restroom, but program it to be open all the time. So with that, I am certainly available for questions.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Is there anybody who has any questions on this from the other commissions?
I had a question about the Acoustifence. It looks pretty heavy. I know it's spec'd for a chain link fence like around a tennis court or pickleball court, but our fence there is older, and I'm just wondering about the structural integrity of the fence given the weight of those sound deadening panels.
We have the Acoustifence rep looked at our site and believed that there wouldn't be a problem, and our crews have not encountered any concerns as we're installing the fence or as installing the Acoustifence. And the other thing to note is the bottom foot to 18 inches is being left unclipped to accommodate waters as the water travels through the park in those periods of high flow.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this? I was just, for me, I was just curious about this parking thing, about the PG&E part of the process there. I know they have to dig and put their trenches in to run the power lines up to the north and stuff. And I know it's a kind of a major project on that. And the time frame, is the parking lot going to be used in between this time that they finish?
Yes. We met with PG&E representatives 2 weeks ago on Monday morning and walked through the project as far as the undergrounding goes. And the facilities that will need to be installed underground are on either end outside the footprint of the parking lot. And the design hasn't been conducted yet, so they're not sure if they'll need to put one vault in the middle in the middle of the parking lot, depending on the run and the conduits that they have to design. So ideally, we won't be doing anything in that paved area. So the parking lot's going to get completed and opened, I want to say in early 2021. And then once 18 months from now or 2 years from now, when PG&E's caught up, there'll be some work to locate the lines underground and remove the poles. And there may or may not be one spot in the middle that has a PG&E underground vault placed in a parking stall.
And what about the light that's in the middle of the parking area that's on the PG&E pole in the middle of the run there. Is there going to be a light installed on that part?
Yes, the design, and the design has 3 of the town standard light poles being installed with the construction of the parking lot, independent of the undergrounding. So there'll be a new street light at either end and one in the middle.
Yes, okay. Very good. I know the vaults are going to be an issue on that thing. I suspect it'll probably be on both ends that something will happen.
And if I could, just to expand, the agreement, RH is responsible for all costs, including the undergrounding. And really, PG&E, frankly, the level of the fires in the area, they're just not, they've got a team and they're really focused on the rebuild in the region. I think many of you may have seen some of the coverage about the large camp out, at Krug, and if you've traveled 29 at 5:30, the litany of trucks that are heading to Napa and American Canyon, where most of the out of area employees are staying. So there's a combination of the design team, and frankly, the design team's overwhelmed, and they're not necessarily known for their quick timelines, but we're being pushed back even further. So we're working to keep this and to really minimize the long-term disruption. So as Director Ferentz pointed out, the idea is to minimize where there could be some disruption and allow the incremental use in the meantime. And again, I will stress, Restoration Hardware is fully responsible. None of the cost of this project are being paid for by the town.
Good. The other thing I did when I was walking in the park today, see a pallet with stone on it. Is that the stone that's going to go on the surface of the retaining wall facing the park?
That's correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I saw one pallet that was there. I didn't see the full load of it. And I did notice that it is quite high under where picnic area 3 and 4 are. It is about 7 feet high. So at that point. So
I'm just going to remind everybody, the project is not complete. The project is designed, and that height, Paul, is actually not, I'm not going to disagree with you, that is probably the highest, but it has a breaking area where there's a stone facing area, a treatment around the kind of the bridge-like treatment, and then it tapers. So I just encourage, and landscaping is clearly not installed, and as was mentioned.
I'm quite aware of that. I'm watching it daily as I walk the dog by there. So I'm just curious about how things are progressing on this stuff, and noticing how things are starting to look. I noticed there are openings being put in there that will allow pedestrians to get through at I think the middle and towards the end. So
and Paul, you're absolutely right. And if you look in the park, we've got several barricades out with park designs, and the park design is actually on the wall of the restroom, so people can look at the construction to the approved plan. So we've really tried to make sure that the users of the park that wander through will have a good understanding of what's going on and what's happening.
I was wondering if maybe we could have something put in the Sun, or not necessarily the Sun, but Steve, when you do the updates on the town website or things, something to go out to the residents about the Hopper Creek situation, just about what they're finishing that section, and then they'll about the bridge not being installed till February. Maybe just, I'm thinking for residents that are in David and my neighborhood and south that are, it doesn't go anywhere. People are going over the cones, et cetera. But just in general, that, it's going to be the bridge will not be completed till February, so people aren't.
I think Vice Chair Sherman, we'll work with bidding some social media out to let people know. We've been joking about maybe we allow them to walk down, see where the bridge will go and back. But there's some things like that. But yeah, I think we can definitely get some information out, because having been out there a lot and as a person that walks throughout town with my own dog, I know there's been a lot of excitement, but really a lot of Rancho de Napa and Bella Vista residents are excited because this will give them a connection where they can take the path up through town and then come back around another section and give them a loop. And yeah, it just reminds me, John, we're going to have to add another butt mitt dispenser. Just came to my mind while we're talking about it, but we'll get that added in. But I think it's going to be well received based on the feedback that we're getting from folks that are wandering by.
It looks great so far. Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments that or questions to ask John here on this? Thank you, John. I appreciate your spending the time to do that and waiting so long.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, last item here, is there any commissioner comments or reports that anyone wants to provide?
I have a question. Maybe Steve can help me with this. I occasionally walk North Washington all the way to 29, and I've noticed there's a lot of dumping of trash, tires, that sort of thing toward the 29 end. And I'm just wondering, is that county responsibility? Is that town responsibility? It's not a very good look for somebody coming into Yountville that way.
The town limits stop at the end of the cemetery and on the other side. So I would recommend contacting Supervisor Dillon and sharing your concerns about the county's maintenance of that area. But several of us in the Kiwanis Club, that's an area that the Yountville Kiwanis Club periodically cleans. And you are correct, Alan, there is at times large scale, just, you know, somebody comes by and dumps the dump truck full of stuff. And I may be able to track down a county public works contact, but I actually do think contacting, if you're willing to contact a supervisor and just let her know, that would be helpful, because their public works team could use the political support to encourage more. And I'll just share, we have a quicker and higher response rate than our residents are going to find from the county. So, but I do think they need to hear that. And hearing it from somebody like you saying we've observed it is different than when I send the note. So I just
happy to do it. I'll take care of it tomorrow.
Yeah, in that aspect, we noticed we clean up debris periodically on Yacht Mill Road as we walk out there.
Yep, same.
It's a project that we all have to deal with.
And it still begets the real question of what's wrong with the people that are putting it there. Why do we have to be cleaning it up? And that's the most, I know for Sam, John, and I, it's just frustrating to think that why are people doing that? And some of it's our own residents in some of the local areas. I don't think the dumping out where Alan's talking about is, but I mean, our own residents are not without sin when it comes to not being able to find a garbage can and use it, or not being able to clean up after their own dogs. You know, the vast majority of dogs wandering through town are not attached to visitors. There are some, but most are attached to a local.
I have to say what Steve was saying, that Sam, Steve, and myself on the call here on Kiwanis and doing the cleanup on Washington, that whole section all the way down to 29. It's unbelievable what we found on Saturday mornings when we've done the pickup. I mean, baby car seats, besides the tires, it's just, besides beer cans and trash of sodas, etc. But it's amazing.
Microwaves.
Microwaves, yeah.
That's out there
Well,
now.
it reminds me, we haven't done our cleanup since spring because of COVID. So it's something maybe we can try to revisit as well, to Kiwanis wise, to help out with that. But good point.
Okay, any other comments or things? With that, I think we've come to the end of the program, and I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting and proceed and schedule the next meeting for January 21st, 2021 will be that. So is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make the motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay, last roll call vote. We have that motion by Commissioner Tincher, seconded by Vice Chair Shermaine. Commissioner Riker, would you like to
Yes.
adjourn?
Yes, I did. I was thinking of the word I.
Yeah. Commissioner Means? Yes. Okay. Commissioner Tincher, you already said that. Chair Marciniak?
Yes.
Okay, everyone is a yes. Thank you so much for your time. I know we've had some quite beefy agendas these last few months, so it's good though. I hope you feel good about it, and I appreciate your time. I know town staff and the council appreciate your time. So
Yeah, I appreciate it too. We are getting some progress.
yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you all. If I don't see you, have a great holidays.
And go in search of a turkey and a snowman. Or
It's
person,
not a
snow
live
person.
turkey. Not a live turkey. We've actually gotten calls asking if we're releasing live turkeys for the turkey hunt. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you
All right.
all.
Good night,
Have a
everybody.
good night.